to this meeting of the Northern Beaches Local Planning Panel. My name is Ross Bonthorn and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Let me start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and paying respect to the elders past, present and emerging. I'm not sure, but am I getting feedback? May I also
ask that all participants go on mute when they're not speaking, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I can hear myself repeating.
Sean Gardner, can you please place your computer on mute? Yep.
I'll
Can't seem to get it on the mute.
I'll continue now.
Apologies, I'm trying. I've had an upgrade to the system and it's not showing me where the mute is changed.
So should we start again or is it better to continue?
Just continue, Ross.
So may I also welcome my fellow panel members today, Sue Weatherly, Jason Perica and Sue Denham, and ask them to briefly introduce themselves. So Sue Weatherly, if you could briefly introduce yourself.
Usually Fridays I work from home.
Yes, my name's Sue Weatherly and I'm one of the independent members of the planning panel.
There used to be a warrior word in that movie.
Thank you, Jason.
Sorry, Will Fleming, can you please put your microphone on mute?
Jason Perica, also an expert panel member appointed by the council, background in town planning.
And Sue Denham.
Oh, hello. Yes, I'm one of the members of the panel. I'm a community representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. My name is Ross Bonthorn. I'm an architect planner. I've served on Pittwater Council. In fact, was appointed to establish Pittwater Council when the secession happened. I've also served on the City of Sydney Council for some 19, 20 years, and at the same time been involved as the principal architect and the director of the Lend-Lease group of organisations. I'd also like to thank and welcome council staff members that make these meetings possible and members of the public that have been connected into the meeting today. Let me give a very brief introduction to the role of the panel and the local planning meetings. In 2018, the state government made local planning panels mandatory for all Sydney councils and Wollongong City Council. The panels aim to provide an increased level of accountability and transparency that ensure better planning outcomes, particularly for developments that are controversial or sensitive or involving a potential or real conflict of interest for the council. The role of the panel is to provide an independent and open forum for interested persons and groups to hear and make submissions about development proposals referred for determination by the panel, consider and determine development applications, application modifications, and reviews of applications directed to the panel under the instructions of the Minister for Planning. The panel also makes recommendations on planning proposals and any other development matters that may be referred to it for consideration. It's important to note that the panel does not set policy, but works within the framework and policy set by the council, state government and the courts. The panel members, there are 4 of us. There's a chairman who's appointed by the minister, 2 experts that are appointed through a process undertaken by the state government, and a community member. And we have them, and they introduced themselves to you a little earlier in the meeting. The panel is bound by a code of conduct. The panel is bound by a code of conduct. Panel members must sign a declaration disclosing whether they have a conflict of interest in relation to any matter that's on the agenda. The meeting format usually includes that the members will do a site inspection, the public meeting for interested persons and groups to hear and make submissions about the development applications, which is what we're in the process of considering now, a closed panel session for the panel to deliberate and determine the outcomes, and a public announcement of the determinations that have been made by the panel. The public meeting provides an opportunity to make oral submissions. They are not a place for debate or discussion, but basically allow questions to be asked if they seem to be required by the panel members. The public meetings are video and audio recorded. The recordings will be published in the council's website in 48 hours after the meeting. Once the speakers in relation to all matters on the agenda have finished, I'll close the meeting. The panel will move into a closed session to deliberate and determine all the matters on the agenda. Each presenter is requested to make a concise 3-minute presentation, and there will be a bell that sounds after 3 minutes. And the panel members can then, if they wish to, ask further questions of the presenters. So moving to the agenda for today's meeting, we have four items which are on the public meeting agenda, and there are people who have requested to present to the panel. The first item is item 1, apologies and declarations of interest. I believe we have no apologies and there are no declarations of interest. If the panel members could confirm that, please.
No conflicts for me.
No
Joseph.
conflicts from me.
And no conflicts from me.
Thank you, and I, as the chair, have no conflicts. So the first item on the meeting agenda is for a DA for 25 Kevin Avenue, Avalon. We have a request to address the panel from Belinda and Ryan Georgeson from 28 Kevin Avenue, and then there are requests from the applicant, which I'll move to later. So do we have Belinda or Ryan Georgeson online? I'm not sure that we have the request speaker online. Belinda? I see, Belinda, your name's coming up, but I don't hear any sound.
Sorry, Belinda, I'm just going to remove you and then just rejoin the meeting. Your mic's just not working. So if you just rejoin once I remove you. Sorry, we'll just have to wait for her to rejoin for a second.
That's okay. That's fine. It's just the process that we generally prefer the applicant to speak after the objectors. I'm sorry, I just have to turn the phone off. I'm sorry. So, Belinda, if we could have you connected, please.
I think she's still not working.
So then
I'm just going to remove her again. I'm just going to call her into the meeting. So just give me a second.
In the interim, do we have any representatives from the applicant online?
Yeah, Greg Boston, planning consultant. Sean
Yes,
Gardner, architect.
Thanks, Greg. I've got your listed with Sean and Greg and Sarah.
Here we go. Sorry, we've got Belinda now.
Belinda, thank you. Welcome. So, as I indicated, if you'd like to make a presentation, you have 3 minutes and there'll be a buzzer or a bell. And if you need a little more time, then we can consider it for summing up. But a 3-minute presentation, please. Have we lost Belinda again?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just going to try call her again.
So just to confirm, we have Greg Boston and Sean Gardner. listed to make the presentation. So we may move on to that if this connection to Belinda Georgeson is not possible.
Belinda, are you there?
Oh, hi, it's Belinda Georgeson. Sorry, I don't know what quite is going on with my phone, but we didn't need to, we had nothing to address. So we're just here to observe.
Thank you, Belinda. I'm sorry that we've had the problems technologically.
No, that's
but
okay,
anyway,
no worries. But yeah, we don't
that's
need
fine.
to address
So
it.
I'll move then to the applicant, to either Greg or Sean. I've got 4 names listed, but potentially I would imagine you don't need all to speak. So Greg Boston, would you like to commence your presentation, please?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm happy to lead off. Look, we understand that apart from a few matters of detailing in the basement, that council staff are comfortable with what is being proposed on the site. The primary issue is not being able to demonstrate that an acceptable path of travel to a bus stop is able to be achieved. Just for the panel's benefit, there's an approved and constructed seniors housing development just down on the corner of Kevin Avenue and Barrenjoey Road. This application originally sought simply to connect into the footpath that development relies on to get its occupants to the bus stop on Barrenjoey Road. But it's since been determined that the path of travel as constructed in accordance with that consent down on the corner actually doesn't comply with the gradient requirements under the SEP. So we've been left in a situation where we need to try and solve not only an access issue for our property, but an as-built access issue for the development down on the corner. And it's just, I guess it's disappointing to a certain extent that through this assessment process, we really haven't been able to get any traction with council's engineers to physically get out onto site and determine, you know, the appropriate construction location of this pathway. So unfortunately, the application's before you today with a recommendation for refusal. I understand the panel can't deal with it because there is a jurisdictional matter in relation to access to the bus stop, but thought it prudent to be here to answer any questions that the panel might have in relation to what is physically proposed on the subject site itself. Yeah, here really to answer any questions that the panel might have. That's it from me, Sean.
Thank you for allowing me to address the panel. This, as Greg has said, is an application that has support under the planning department of council. We have a primary issue of access to the bus stop with some semantics in terms of traffic in the basement. The application has been in for quite a long period of time, and it's my understanding that this is why it's been pushed up to the panel without the opportunity to try and resolve the traffic with council's planners. I'd like to thank council's planners for their work in seeing how we can come up with a solution for this site. It's not an easy site in terms of its location, but we've gained support in planning terms for the building itself. And as Greg has said, I'm more interested in hearing from the panel to see if there's any other questions that come up in regards to the building. I understand that we will need to address the access to the bus stop and the traffic semantics in either an S82 or a section 34. So yeah, look, if there's anything from the panel that you'd like to ask in terms of the building itself and how the building fits into its environment, then happy to answer any questions.
So panel members, are there any questions of either Greg or Sean?
Me.
No?
Ross?
Sue?
I'm not sure who's the correct person to answer this, Ross or Sean, but do you agree that you do need to make a formal request under clause 4.6 for the variation of the distance to access the transport facilities?
Yeah, look, clause 4.6 needs to be prepared. The challenge has been we just haven't been able to settle on a pathway location and route such that the travel distance is known. If we were able to utilise the existing footpath, then there wouldn't be a need. But the fact that there has to be some adjustment in terms of the current footpath arrangement down on the corner, yes, a 4.6 will be prepared once we can settle the pathway design and location.
Thank you.
So, any other comments or questions? No. So, Greg or Sean, the only question I guess I have was that the non-compliance or non-submission of the clause 4.6, but also the parking, according to the report, indicates that there's a shortfall of parking, no visitor parking, and in fact, potentially there should have been 18 cars. Is there any reason why that is not complied with?
Look, all I'll say before you answer, Sean, what I can say that in relation to the housing set provisions under which the application is made, there is no requirement for visitor parking for seniors housing. And I think the difference between the council assessment report and what is provided on site is the difference between the parking rate under the SEP in relation to this development and the parking rate under the council's DCP as it relates to medium density housing. But we certainly comply with the housing SEP provisions in relation to seniors housing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Greg on that. And the other issues in terms of the basement are in my opinion, semantics. We were asked for some swept path diagrams in effectively a almost straight driveway. They're easy to do. We actually have them. And there was another question in terms of bollards and garages, which I think is also just a matter of having a discussion with council's traffic planning department, and that can be resolved. So that's where I believe the traffic sits. It's an easy one to resolve. It's really just the access to the bus stop.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the panel? If not, Greg and Sean, thank you very much for your presentation. Belinda, I trust that you have been able to understand or hear from the applicant. And so this matter will now go into the meeting later in the afternoon to determine, to consider and determine and make a resolution this afternoon. So that's the requirement for 4.1. I'll move to the next item. The next item is 4.2, 16 Jubilee Avenue, Warriewood. There are no objectors. And the applicant, I'm not sure if we have Mr. Fleming or the owner present at the moment.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Ashley Richardson. I'm the planning consultant for the applicant. I haven't registered to speak. I would appreciate the opportunity to, if that's possible, but I acknowledge that I haven't registered.
So is Mr. Fleming present?
Yes, I'm here with Kelly Gillis. This is in relation to 16 Banger Street.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
We're the applicant, Chair.
16 Jubilee Avenue.
We're the applicants for the 16 Banger Street.
No,
Jubilee.
I'm sorry. Your name is listed on the list today to speak to item 4.2, 16 Jubilee Avenue, Warriewood.
Sorry, Ross. Yeah, they're meant to be on 16 Banger. So we'll hear from them after.
Fine. Okay. So for 16 Jubilee Avenue, Warriewood, I'm sorry, there was a request to present to the panel. Could I have your name again, sir?
Ashley Richardson.
Ashley, if you'd like to address the panel for 3 minutes, there'll be a little bell that rings. And if you need another little brief moment to sum up, that can be organised. Thank you. And the others obviously are for a different project. So sorry for the confusion.
That's okay. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak at the last minute, so thank you. This application is essentially for alterations and additions to an existing warehouse for the storage of some dangerous goods and a dangerous goods enclosure and associated sprinkler systems. This application really didn't get off the ground in terms of an assessment from council because council took the position that the development is designated development pursuant to the EPA regulations, and therefore they couldn't consider it as part of a DA, and I believe that's why it's been referred to the panel for determination. I have prepared a response to council, which is on file, and we've also prepared a response from our legal team, which essentially addresses the designated development thresholds in the EPA regs. Part 3 of Schedule 3 of the EPA regs grants exemptions to designated development for certain uses that are ancillary and used in conjunction with an existing development. I have some fundamental disagreements with council's consideration of part 3. They've assessed that on the basis that these are exceptions to existing designated development. That's not how the clause is worded in the regs. The clause in the regs says that that there are exceptions to development where it would be designated development, but it's fairly minor or it's ancillary to an existing use. So our position and the position of the legal team is that given the works are not, they are introducing chemical storage, but the chemical storage is ancillary to the existing operations of the warehouse on the site. And whilst it is introducing a new use, that doesn't preclude it from being an ancillary use to the existing warehouse. And so we've prepared a preliminary hazard analysis which looks at the quantity of dangerous goods proposed to be stored on the site. The quantity of dangerous goods do not trigger designated development. The reason that it's triggered designated development is because the site's located on a floodplain. Now, council has said that there are a number of referrals that are supportive of the application. Council's flood engineer is not supportive of the application. And part of that reason is that a flood report hasn't been prepared. We are happy to prepare that. We weren't given the opportunity to address that, but we are happy to prepare that if the panel is of the opinion that this application can be considered as a local development because it is an ancillary use to an existing warehouse. So I understand there's no additional supporting documentation, but having seen the referral from council's flood engineer suggesting that a flood impact assessment is required, I would respectfully request that if the panel could defer the application for us to prepare that necessary documentation and submit it, that would be appreciated.
Actually, just if you could sum up, please.
We don't need to be spending like that. Thank you.
Actually, if you could sum up, please.
Yeah, look, that's all I wanted to say essentially, but I'm requesting that the panel defer the application if they believe that, if they agree with our legal advice that it can be considered as a local development, not as a designated development given the exceptions in the regs, and defer the application for us to prepare the necessary documentation for council to assess it as a local DA.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any other speakers on this subject. Does the panel have any questions of Mr. Richardson? No questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement for Mr. Richardson. Just so the basis of the argument for you is that it's ancillary to the predominant storage use. Is that's basically where you're coming from?
That's correct. The principal purpose of the site doesn't change, and it's the same user, it's the same operator. The majority of the site is over 90% of the floor space of the site is not changing. It's introducing an additional storage cage to store some dangerous goods in association with the existing use.
90%. I had a look at the floor plans. It looked like there was three sort of, looked about a 25 to 33%, that sort of range, a quarter to a third of the floor space. Is it a lot less than that, is it?
That may be the case. It may be more like a third.
Right, okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions from the panel, please? No? Mr. Richardson, or thank you very much for your information. The
Thank
panel
you.
will
Thanks, Pat.
consider this and make a determination later today, which will be on the council website within 48 hours.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So I'll move now to item 4.3, which is 6 Clifford Avenue, Fairlight. I believe the applicant is online. Matthew?
Yes, thank you, Chair and panel members. We support Council's assessment report with the recommendation of approval, and I'm available for any questions that the panel may have.
So thank you. Does the panel have any questions? It would seem not. So if there's no questions and no further discussion, then I'll allow this to be referred to the panel later in the afternoon, and the determination will be available on the council website later in 48 hours.
Thank you, Chair and panel.
You're welcome. So I'll move then to the final item, which is 4.4, 16 Barangaroo Street, North Balgala. And I believe, Mr. Fleming, you're still there?
Yes, Chair, still here.
Thank you. I'm sorry about the slight confusion, but if you would like to speak to this, or is Mr. Perks there?
Yes, I'm here too.
Sorry?
Yes, this is David Perks.
David, thank you. If you could actually, because you're, I believe, objecting to the proposal. So if you would like to address the panel for 3 minutes, there'll be a little bell that sounds, and if you could then wind up. So if you would like to proceed, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and panel members. I'm representing myself, but also a number of adjoining neighbours to 16 Barangaroo Street. And we object to this proposal for a number of reasons. There's quite a lot of written objections that make really solid points, but 2 points I'd like to make to the panel today. The first is that council have themselves brought in building controls to look into the replacement of natural landscape on this property with synthetic landscape, and that has significantly affected ratios that are incorrect in the submitted plans and reports. That in itself seems like a reason to pause this application until the outcome of that investigation is known, due to the fact that there may be subsequent plans required or changes to plans required to bring those ratios back into line. However, if a pause isn't appropriate, there are probably enough reasons to refuse the application today, and that's what I'll bring to the attention of panel today. So the property is quite a small property. It has 1 parking space, not 2, that are claimed in the application. And it's used for 2 uses. It's used during the daytime by the investor owners as a family daycare centre, and its second use is as a residence. So currently it's not occupied, but that dual use does mean that there is intensity of use around this property. And that brings issues of noise, parking, alarms going off and unattended at over night time. So quite a lot of impacts on neighbours as it stands. Now those uses are approved uses. The property is able to be used as a family daycare and a residence. But this change actually brings all the impacts so much closer to the boundary of the property and so much closer to neighbours. So the proposed staircase would allow that 7 parents and children could use that entrance instead of using the current entrance, which is central to the property. 7 parents and children and the residents of the property could be using that staircase in the early hours of the morning for drop-off as a half an hour window for that, and in the hours of the evening for pickup. We feel that noise proximity overlooking of the neighbouring properties means that this application makes 16 Banger Street incapable of being a good neighbour, and it's inappropriate for the residents to move the entrance or a secondary entrance to the property to closer to the boundary when such high use could be made of it. If approval is considered, then we'd really appreciate that council does take that impact into account. And from a privacy standpoint, and I'm nearly finished, there are significant amounts of surveillance at the property, cameras and microphones, given that it is empty, other than when the family daycare is operating. And the installation of a camera or a microphone in an elevated spot near the proposed staircase or door would actually counteract any benefits of a privacy screen or other measures that are being proposed to try to mitigate the overlooking issues. So those are the main points of objection.
Thank you, Matthew, very much. And I'm sorry to keep you waiting as long as we did. I believe, Mr. Fleming, you wish to address the panel on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm here with Fiona Kelly to support the recommendation of approval and to answer any questions that the panel may have. I just want to make it abundantly clear what this application is proposing, and that is the external staircase to a ground floor entry and an internal staircase from up to the first floor. That is all that's being proposed. This is alterations and additions to the dwelling. All the other issues that have been raised in submissions relating to parking, landscaping, etc., are not relevant to this application. Yes, there is a family daycare centre operating out of the dwelling, but that is permissible without consent, and we have all the appropriate approvals for that, and it is registered with Northern Beaches Council. So in that regard, any issues that are raised need to be related to what is actually being proposed, and none of the issues that Mr. Perks has raised, with the exception of privacy, which we have provided a privacy screen to the top of the external stair, is not relevant to this application. Mr. Perks has raised an issue about security cameras, and I think it's important for the panel to understand how much harassment and intimidation has been subjected to my client ever since the first application for a childcare centre has been lodged. The security cameras are there because police said you are required to have them for your own safety. There is a gentleman neighbour next door who has a AVO against him because he attacked my client's daughter with a shovel, and he is facing court next month. The behaviour of these neighbours has been unhinged in relation to this application in the childcare centre. And in this situation, we think it's unreasonable to be entertaining these issues that are raised that aren't relevant to what is actually being proposed now. So with that being said, we're happy to answer any questions that the panel may have.
And does the owner wish to address the panel, or you've spoken?
She's here with me, so.
I'm just happy to be here present with Will.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions of the panel? Or any comments from the panel? Can you switch on the sound, Sue? We can't hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. I just thought I'd do all the right things and raise my hand as well. Look, the only concern I have really is around the noise mentioned in the early morning pickup and drop off. Do you have any comments on that one, please?
Yes, so there's only 4 children at the family daycare centre at the moment. I think it's because they're not in school. You can only have up to 4 kids that aren't in school at the daycare centre, and they will be using the main entrance to the front. The purpose of the stairs was to provide Kelly's daughter's husband an entry that wouldn't disturb the daycare centre and that he could go directly upstairs. So people dropping off their kids will be using the front door as per usual.
Thank you. Any other observations or questions?
I guess I've got one just arises from that question. So it's a home-based childcare centre, which I think doesn't need approval. Is that right? So it's not a separate childcare facility that's not home-based. Is that right?
No, it's a home-based childcare, which is permissible without consent. We had lodged previous DAs for a centre-based childcare centre that was ultimately refused. So we pursued a family daycare centre, which is registered with Northern Beaches Council and permissible without consent.
So no further questions. Just a couple of questions to you, Will, or to your client. Just if you have any comments on any of the conditions that have been specifically put onto this, particularly conditions 3, 4, and 5. 3, which talks about there being no secondary dwelling. Condition number 4 about it being used only as a dwelling house. And condition number 5 that there's no approval to any of the existing works. Do you have any comments about those conditions?
No issue with that. We have no intention of. So no issues with the conditions, and we have no intention of using it as a dual occupancy or a secondary dwelling use. It's a dwelling house. And understand if the neighbours have an issue with any of the works that have been done, this isn't the avenue to raise those issues. They can bring it up with council.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I had to leave for 1 second. And then the only other question is, could you clarify whether there is or is not to be a kitchen in the upstairs area of the proposal?
No kitchen.
So thank you. So if there are no further questions or comments, then thank you and for those who have attended, and that would complete the items for this particular committee meeting or panel meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to just